Let's add custom blocks to Minecraft using NeoForge. 121 Minecraft modding course is available down below, with over 11 hours of content covering everything from the basics all the way to block entities and custom mobs. Alright, friends, I'm back and tell you once more, and in this tutorial we'll be adding custom blocks to our project over here. Of course, once again in 1.21.1 this time, but the changes are basically non-existent. There's basically no changes, so you should be good to go to follow this. As always, of course, check the description below for the compatibility. So if you're watching this way into the future, right, 1.21.7 is out. There might be some changes at that point. But custom blocks, yeah, that's going to be very interesting indeed. And let's just take a look. So in our tutorial mod package, we are simply going to right-click New Package, and we will make the block package. Of course, this is once again for some organizational purposes. And inside of here, we want to create a new Java class, and this is going to be our ModBlocks class over here. And of course, we're going to add this via GitHub as well. And for this, well, we will need a very similar thing to what we've seen for the mod items, and that is, of course, a deferred register. Once again, this is going to be a public, static, and then a final. This is going to be a deferred register over here, dot, and then we're going to choose blocks right here. And once again, we can simply hit the tab key to autocomplete this, and we're going to call this whole thing blocks, which is going to be equal to the deferred register. And you can actually see it already suggests to me to use the create blocks method right here, which is exactly what we're going to do once again by hitting tab to autocomplete this and passing in tutorial mod.mod_id. Once again, tab to autocomplete it, and there we have our deferred register basically created. And of course, for a deferred register, this is, once again, sort of our list of blocks over here that we wanted to register. And that also has to be registered itself. So for this, every time you have a deferred register, you always want a public static void register method, and that will always include an iEvent bus over here. Right, once again, tab to autocomplete it. Want to call this parameter the event bus, and then simply call blocks.register, passing in exactly that event bus parameter over here. And this register method, then going to tutorial mod, to the tutorial mod class. We're going to call this down below right here. So modblocks.register, and then passing in a mod event bus over here. There you go. And we're going to click on this and import the class, alt and enter. And there we freaking go. And we can proceed with the ModBlocks class. So the ModBlocks class is a little bit more complicated simply because of the fact that when we register a block, we also have to register an item that is associated with that block. Now, there are many different ways that you can do this with. I'm going to do it with a helper method. You can also do it many different ways, like I said, but that's the way that we're going to do it. So we're going to start with a private static, and then we're going to have to put in the angled brackets uppercase T extends the block class from net Minecraft world level block. I'm going to import this as well, and then closing angle bracket. This is going to be a void, and this is going to be the register block item method with a string name parameter and a deferred block. It's this time, so this is going to be a deferred block of type T. I'm going to call this the block right here, and this will call mod items.items. This is going to be the deferred register.register. Right, we're going to import the mod items class, and then we're going to call the register method, passing in the name, and then making a new supplier of a new block item. Very important that this is a block item. Once again, tab to autocomplete it, and then it's going to automatically import the class as well. We're going to pass in a block.get, and the second parameter is going to be new item properties. Once again, when it's selected, simply tap to autocomplete it, and there you go. Now, as always, of course, all of the code is also available down below in the GitHub repository, so you can also double check it, because this, the construct over here with the generics can sometimes be a little bit crazy. And we're going to continue with the craziness, because then we have the helper method that is going to actually register the block. We once again need a private static T extends the block class over here, and this time this actually returns a deferred block of type T. In this case, this is the register block method, passing in a string name parameter and passing in a supplier of type T. Also import this. This is from Java util function over here. It's going to be our block. There you go. And then this is going to do a couple of things. We're going to make a deferred block of type T to return variable over here, which is going to be equal to the blocks.register. We don't want to use the register block over here. We want to use the register method, passing in the name and passing in the block. Then we will call the register block item method, passing in the name and the to return over here, and then return to return. So the general idea here is the reason why we're doing this is because what we want to do is we want to actually create and also register that block, right? We're doing this with the first line in our custom method right here. Then we're registering the block item associated with it, right? That's why it's called register block item, and that has to be done via an item deferred register, and that is why we're using the one from the mod items class. And then we're simply returning it because this is going to be called, and we basically want a field that we can access for our block. So it is, all things considered, not actually that crazy. And let's just see how this is going to look like. So if we want to register a block, we're going to do a public static final, and this is going to be a deferred block over here of type block in this case. And this is going to be the bismuth underscore block equal to the just newly created register block method over here. And then the name is going to be bismuth underscore block, of course, all lowercase again, and then a supplier of a new block in this case. And here we're going to choose block behavior. As you can see, once again, hit tab to autocompleted, dot properties, tab to autocompleted, dot, and then we're going to use the off over here. And then we can actually add some properties. So we can, as you can see, we can change the sound type. We can change the strength. This is how long it takes for you to mine this. Now, very importantly, this is extremely important. When we're done with our blocks, you will not be able to mine anything. Like, they're not going to drop. This is something we'll do in a future tutorial. Please keep that in mind. You will not be able, like, your blocks are not going to drop anything for the time being. But still, we can call the strength over here. Then we can also say requires correct tool for drops. That is needed basically for almost all of the blocks when you don't want them to be mineable with the hand, right? If you actually need a specific tool. And then let's do also a sound over here with a sound type. Let's just, I think amethyst is actually kind of fun for the bismuth. I think it kind of fits. Let's just do that, and there you go. Now, of course, now this is a builder pattern, so you can, of course, call many other methods as well, which we will see during the tutorial series as well. You can, of course, also check vanilla, right? The vanilla blocks class is actually quite interesting. Simply press shift twice and then search for blocks, include non-project items, and we can see net Minecraft world level block over here. And what you'll find here is, well, every block that exists in Minecraft, right? So they're formatted interestingly, but basically the idea is you can see, for example, oak planks over here have a map color, an instrument node, a specific strength, and there are certain things over here, certain block behaviors that are added. Highly recommended to basically take a look at them. That is just going to be really, really useful for you. And that is always a great resource. Now, having added this, the next thing that we want to do is add it to our creative mode tab. Well, to do this, simply, we're going to go into the tutorial mod class again. And inside of here, we don't want to add it to the ingredients in this case. I actually wanted to add it to a different one. So once again, we're going to make a different if statement over here. Get a tab key is going to be equal to creative mode tabs dot, and then let's choose building blocks in this case. I think that is fine. And here we're going to then call event.accept, and we're going to accept ModBlocks.bismuth block, and that's going to be it. So basically it's going to add the bismuth block over here to the building blocks creative mode tab. With that done, that's pretty neat. However, now we need the assets, and for blocks, well, it gets a little bit more complicated. So we have seen last time with items, we needed an item model JSON file. This is simply for the texture to properly be displayed inside of the inventory. And while we still need this for our block as well, we actually need two more JSON files. That is a block states JSON file and a block model JSON file. Let's first of all start by creating all of the different folders that we need. So in assets tutorial mod, we're going to right-click new directory called block states. Very important, block states. Then in the models folder, we want to create a new directory called block. And in the textures folder, also right-click new directory called block. We're going to start with the block states JSON file and work our way down. So let's see in the block states folder, right-click new file called the bismuth underscore block.json. The name of this particular JSON file, of course, matching the name that we've registered this block under, and the contents of which look as follows. Of course, as always, the opening and closing curly bracket. Then we're going to have variance. Note that variance is written like this, right? So it has to be written like this. I've seen people accidentally do an E over here. That's not right. It is variance written like this. Inside of this object, we're going to have empty quotation marks and then another object, and that one has a model over here, and that model is going to be tutorial mod colon block slash bismuth underscore block. Now the question is, what the frick is going on over here? A block states JSON file determines which block model should be displayed inside of the world. So we take our block and we set it down in the world. And let's say, for example, you have redstone dust, right? Redstone dust can be on or off. That would require two different models. That's a high level overview, right? A bit of a simplification, but you can have an on and off. And that would basically be two different models. And therefore, what happens is that you have different variants. If you have a very simple block, you have empty variants over here and you point to one block model file. And that's also what this all means, right? This block points to a model over here inside of tutorial mod, right? Inside of the, not the en_use_JSON file, but the block folder right here, looking for a bismuth underscore block.json file. Let's create that as well. So that's going to be in tutorial mod, models block, bismuth underscore block.json. This is what we refer to as the block model JSON file, and that one is going to be very similar to what we've seen before. Once again, I'll type this out. The JSON files and all of it is also available down below in the GitHub repository, so no worries at all. This is going to be a parent of block slash cube underscore all, then a textures object again over here with all of the textures pointing to tutorial mod colon block slash bismuth underscore block. And what do you see over here? Well, wait a second. If we were to compare this with our item model JSON files that we've seen before, they look incredibly similar. In fact, they're almost identical. Of course, some of the specifics are a little bit different, but they are pretty similar. The parent over here, of course, determines how the texture is displayed on our block. Cube all simply says all 6 sides of our cube are going to have the bismuth underscore block texture we're defining right here in the texture object. And that is going to be exactly what we have. So that's texture. I'm going to copy this over, and there you go, bismuth underscore block.png. This is going to be available to you. Once again, you simply drag it into the folder right here, and you should be good to go. But we're not done quite just yet, because we also need an item model JSON file, very importantly, for your blocks. So your blocks need a block states JSON file, a block model JSON file, and an item model JSON file. Now, luckily, the item model JSON file is very straightforward. So in models item, we're going to right-click new file called bismuth underscore block.json. And this one is going to look as follows. It's going to have a parent, and the parent is simply going to be tutorial mod colon block slash bismuth underscore block. And this is because this one simply refers back to the block model JSON file. So this one just looks at the block model JSON file over here, which basically says, hey, just give me a cube all with all of the different sides being the same texture. So it's going to display our item, right? The item for our block in the normal way that any normal block is basically displayed, sort of in this 3D sort of way inside of the inventory. Very straightforward. To give this a translation, of course, in the en_use JSON file, it's going to be very straightforward. Instead of item, it's going to be block.tutorialmod. In this case, bismuth underscore block. And of course, this is going to be the block of bismuth over here. I believe that that is the translation convention over here for blocks in this case. But that is pretty freaking cool though. And yes, we're going to do it manually over here for the time being with the JSON file. So yes, every block needs a block stage JSON file, and then every block needs a block model JSON file. Some of them might even need multiple if you have multiple block states, right? So that is a thing. And then you always need an item model JSON file for it as well, a texture, and of course a translation. So those are always going to be the steps that you will have to do. In a future tutorial, we will see data gen, which is going to generate us all of those JSON files, let's say a little bit more easily, at least for very simple blocks. That's going to be very straightforward. But yeah, those are all of the steps that we need to take. So we can literally just jump into the game and see if it works. All right, find ourselves back in Minecraft, and let's take a look. This is going to be the building blocks. Now this one, the building blocks at the very bottom, and there it freaking is, the block of bismuth. I freaking love it. I really like this texture. It is a little bit strange, let's say. It gets me some sort of like Willy Wonka vibes, right? Or am I off base? I feel like it is pretty cool though. And yeah, there you go. You can even hear it, right? I can actually turn this up a little bit, and let me turn up the volume a little bit, and you should also hear Might have to adjust that a little bit in post, but yeah, basically. But yeah, the blocks also have a custom sound, basically the one that we've defined, and that is pretty freaking cool. Now, really, the blocks, they don't do anything as of right now. As I've previously said, right, whatever pickaxe I take, right, you cannot mine this, or rather, I mean, you can try. As you can see, it's going to take a while, and it's not going to drop anything. That is something we're doing in the loot table tutorial. Keep that in mind. That is going to come as well in a little bit. But yeah, that is basically going to be a different tutorial. Very important. And as we've done with the item, how about, Pig, we add a second block? Huh? How about that? Yeah, I think so too. Right, and our second block is going to be quite interesting. So let's go to the ModBlocks class again. And what we will do is, well, simply register another block, right? So once again, a public static final deferred block over here. Once again, tap to auto-completed. It's going to be a block. And we're going to call this the bismuth underscore ore over here, equal to the register block method. It's going to be the bismuth underscore ore. And it's going to be a supplier of, and now we're going to actually do something pretty crazy, because for ores, when you mine them, what you want to happen is you sometimes, or most of the time even always, want some experience to drop. So for a ore, right, for an ore block, we're going to make a new drop experience block right here, which is going to be very straightforward to use. You can see the first parameter is just an int provider over here of the experience range. So we're going to do a uniform int dot of in this case, and we're going to do between 2 and 4 over here. We're going to drop, and then the second parameter is just going to be block behavior dot properties dot of once again, and then we can define all of the rest. So like, let's say, for example, over here, the strength, right, maybe a 3F or something like that, requires correct tool for drop. Once again, you're selected to press tab to auto-complete it, and the sound type over here is going to be sound type of, this would be, is there rock? No, then there's probably stone though, right? Yes, stone does exist. There you go. And that would be one of the ores over here added as well. And yes, for a new block, we also have to go through all of the other steps. So in our tutorial mod class, right, we also want to call, once again, event.accept over here, modblocks.bismuth ore. So that now we have added it to a creative mode tab. And we then want to continue. Let's first of all do the translation, because that's fairly simple. We simply click on this line, press Ctrl D to duplicate it, add the comma over here, and then we can simply basically change this to bismuth underscore ore. And then this would be the bismuth ore over here in this case. That is a little bit more straightforward. And then when it comes to all of the JSON files, well, there is the same trick that we've done last time, where we simply drag the JSON file into the same folder while holding Control. This is going to duplicate that JSON file, and then simply changing the name over here is going to change the name right here, right? So now we are in the bismuth underscore ore.json file. So we then want to change the model that it points to bismuth underscore ore. And then we, of course, want to do the same thing for the block, right? We pass it in, or like drag it into the same folder while holding Control. We change it to bismuth underscore ore.json. Once again, here then changing it to what texture it points to. And then last but certainly not least, the item model JSON file, the same thing, right? We drag it into the same folder while holding Control. We change it to bismuth underscore ore. And then here as well, bismuth underscore ore now points to the block model JSON file right there. And lastly, we need the texture, of course, which is going to be provided to you as well, of course, down below. And there you go. That is the bismuth ore now also done. And this would be the second block. So you can see, once you're going through this like a couple of times, I'm telling you, it's going to get easier and easier. The best way to basically learn, okay, how can I add an item? How can I add a block? Genuinely, add 100 blocks. I'm not even kidding, right? Add one block, right? Like add one block and then delete the entire class and then add the block again, right? And you're like, I don't know how it works, right? You watch the part of the tutorial again, like, okay, the third blocks, okay, right? You wait 10 minutes, you delete everything again, you add it again. And then you're going to go through and you're like, oh, the block doesn't have a texture in the inventory. Oh, yeah, I forgot the item model JSON file. Things like that. You're going to learn as you do. There's basically no other way to do it. So, and then in this case, repetition is going to be absolutely the best way to basically get to the point where you can easily say, oh yeah, I know how to add a block. I know how to add an item. That's easy enough. But for the sake of argument, let's jump into the game again and actually see the ore as well. All right, so we're back with our piggy over here. And of course, let's take a look over here. There it freaking is, the bismuth ore. absolutely friggin' fantastic. And once again, in this instance too, you cannot mine it yet, right? It doesn't work yet. Nothing is going to drop, right? It is not yet defined. That is, of course, one very important thing, right? That we're going to define that in a future tutorial. I know I've mentioned this a couple of times, but the last few tutorial series, people have been very confused. Why does my block not drop anything? It's because we haven't defined it yet. We're going to do that in a separate tutorial. But that is custom blocks added to Minecraft. Pretty freaking cool. Right, some very quick errors, right? If you do not have a texture inside of the world, but you do have one in the inventory, it is your block states JSON file that you need to look at. If you do have a texture inside of the world, but not inside of the inventory, it is the item model JSON file you need to take a look at. If it doesn't work in both of them, it can be any of your JSON files. Most likely it's the block model JSON file, but it can also be both the item as well as the block states JSON file. You just double check them all. Make sure the folder structure is correct, or the folders have the right names, the names of the JSON files are correct, and the contents of the JSON files are also written correctly. I've seen all sorts of different like typos in here you cannot even believe. Like, it is just what it is, right? Basically, double check all of the spelling. I know you're like, I've checked everything, but it still doesn't work. Then there has to be still an error in some of the JSON files, right? I mean, if it's all correct, then it should work. For this, of course, all of the code here and the JSON files and everything is available down below, so you can check the GitHub repository and basically, well, make sure that everything is written exactly the same way as I have it too. Well, yeah, that is going to be it for this tutorial right here. Next time in this video, we'll also add a custom creative mode tab. Hope to see you there. So, yeah.